We start, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So a very good morning to all of you. My name is Amir, and I welcome you all to this webinar on behalf of WII-ENVIS Center at Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. We have arranged a session today when we will be dealing with wildlife conservation photography, and our speaker would be Mr. Raghav Gupta. I would request our coordinator, sir, Dr. Kirimai, sir, to say a few words and officially welcome our speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Amir. So good morning, everyone. It's a very important day. I have a privilege to invite Mr. Raghav Gupta. Is a very unusual, at the same time, very popular personality, because he's an IRS person, but with a lot of passion wildlife. I think we are going to be having an excellent session. Anyway, Amir will be introducing him in detail. So I think I would like to extend my congratulations and compliments to all of you for celebrating this wetland day. I think it goes without saying, wetland as a water body, I think it's everything for life. I think as a human being, we all realize our life starts from water and we also end in water. So I think this entire life in between is actually through the process of the water only. So therefore, I think it's very important that we keep telling that to ourselves, that how important the natural world to us and how kind the natural world has been to us, and how grateful we must be. And I think it's an opportunity for us to keep and realizing and telling to ourselves. So therefore, I think it's an important day for us. Because this is my first occasion as being part of the INVIS Center, therefore I also feel very privileged to be part of this excellent team of the INVIS team at the Wildlife Institute. And I'm also privileged because the first of my engagement is starting with Mr. Raghav Gupta, and I can see his motivation and energy. So without taking much time, I hand over to Amir to basically initiate this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So on behalf of INVIS Resource Partner at Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, I would like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Raghav Gupta. So a brief about Raghav Gupta. Mr. Raghav Gupta is an Indian Revenue Service officer of 2012 batch, and he belongs to Kanpur. He is currently posted as a Joint Commissioner of Income Tax at Kanpur. Mr. Gupta became the first IRS officer in India to complete APCID course from IBFD and has been selected by OECD Tax Crime Academy as a trainer and facilitator for international programs on financial investigations. Mr. Gupta's passion for wildlife photography has won him national level accolades. He has written for the Hindu, Savers, Hornbill, and Sanctuary Asia. A passionate conservationist, he is an advisor in ERDS Foundation's Great Indian Bustard program and a lifetime member of BNHS. He has completed courses from Cornell Lab, on National Geographic, IIT, IIFM, and IUCN. And he has also conducted several wildlife conservation photography webinars for youth across India, including at the Center for Environment Education, CEE, under MOFCC. Through his writings, webinars, and photography, he strives to spread awareness about wildlife diversity and conservation. Mr. Gupta pursues his other interests in astronomy, Egyptology, singing, and teaching. And today he would be sharing some fascinating stories from his immense experience with the wild. So then the title which we have selected fits in here perfectly, that is Wildlife Conservation Photography and Stories from the Wild. And we would love to take your suggestions, comments, and questions at the end of the talk. You can drop them on our YouTube chat box, and we'll be sharing a feedback link with you for your feedback and for the certificates. With this, I would like to welcome you again, Mr. Raghav Gupta, and over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Amir. Thank you so much for such a humbling introduction. Thank you, Dr. Krishnamurthy, for having me here. And big thanks to Wildlife Institute of India, INVIS RP, for giving me this chance, because as a child, I remember reading about Wildlife Institute of India and, you know, the amount of research it used to do on a variety of animals and endangered species. And now it's a full circle when I'm actually here and, you know, able to interact with the Institute. It's a big privilege for me. So without wasting more time, I think I'll just share the screen. Please let me know, Amir, if it's working. I think, yeah, it should be visible now. Is it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, sir.
Right. So as we've already talked about, the topic for today is wildlife conservation photography, stories from the wild, and this is both exciting and it's one of those rare moments when you can have something which gives you immense satisfaction. At the same time, it sort of conveys the reality, the challenges of what the Indian wildlife is going through. So an overview of the webinar, we'll be talking about in 4-5 parts about this the webinar. And firstly, we'll be talking about why do we need conservation photography? What is conservation photography all about? And why do we even require it in the first place? And then we look at some photo stories, some incredible moments from wildlife, where a single photograph or a series of photos can actually communicate and tell stories about how wildlife is not so wild, really. It actually behaves like humans. So that is one thing which I always underline, and I think that is the part of the tagline of this program as well, that the more we understand how human or how the same emotions are reflected in wildlife, do we realize that they are not really very different. We are actually derived from them. So it's not vice versa. It's actually that we are the last entrants in this race of evolution. So we have to respect that. Then we'll talk about a bit in the same strain about photography ethics, which is an important part of doing photography, especially for those who are watching and those who are aspiring photographers or already are photographers. This is an important aspect which we need to keep in mind while undergoing wildlife photography. And then we'll briefly look at some courses which people can take up to enrich themselves both in wildlife and photography. And then, of course, we'll have a brief interactive session. So that broadly covers the idea of this webinar. So beginning with the first part, that why do we need conservation photography? So this is a rhododendron tree from Arunachal, which is one of my favorite destinations, which I almost go every year to. And mandatorily, I need to include a photograph from Arunachal every year. So here it is, and that sets the background to where we are beginning. And no story or no, they say 1,000 words can be communicated by a single picture. So we don't have a single picture here, but we have multiple, and that will sort of give an idea of what kind of biodiversity does India have. That gives a sense of the idea what we're talking about. This is the Indian gazelle, the chinkara from Rajasthan, the deserts of Rajasthan, and this is the Eurasian coot, a water bird, Uttarakhand. This, of course, is the tiger from Jim Corbett. This is a picture-winged dragonfly from Maharashtra, Navi Mumbai. Here is a rhesus monkey from the backyard of my own home in Kanpur. This is a gharial from Chambal, Morena, Madhya Pradesh. Here is the Tibetan sand fox from Sikkim, Guru Dongmar. These are the Saras cranes from Uttar Pradesh. And this is Tosomia's forest skink from Kerala. Here is a Malabar grey hornbill from Dandeli, Karnataka. And here is a Bengal Florican from Assam. So you can assess the kind of variety we have, both in terms of the variety of habitats as well as the variety of fauna. It ranges from all sizes, all colors, all kinds of possibilities, which other countries may not have the luxury of. And India has that amazing biodiversity ranging from across habitats, which may be spread across continents, but we're lucky to have all of it in the same country. And the kind of biodiversity, especially in birds, we have about 1,300 species, and the world has around 12,000. So that nearly is more than 10% of the world's birds are found in India. And India, I think, ranks 4th or 5th in the world's diversity of birds. So that gives the broad idea of why we need to understand more about these creatures, more about wildlife, to actually appreciate this valuable asset which we have and which we don't really realize. So that is something which we need to know through conservation. Here's an example of a photograph from Surajpur, Uttar Pradesh. The idea is that this is a black-necked stork, and it's a huge bird. And this bird is known to come to its nest every year, year after year. It reuses its nest for giving birth to young ones. And the idea behind this photo is that there's a lot of greenery here in the foreground, but it is the background which is wires coming. And the idea is that till when would this balance continue? This is right in the middle of the city. So till when would this city let this bird continue using its nest until the sounds and the smells of the city come closer and closer and drive the bird away? So this is an example of how, in a small little picture, this bird is actually huge, but here it conveys the smallness of things by telling that, the bird is in imminent danger, and yet it's just sticking its courage out with the present scenario. Here's another example from Bah in Uttar Pradesh. And this was during, we were going through the fields. And as you know, most of the agricultural fields are remnants of grasslands. So black bucks are mostly, grassland creatures, and they like feeding in the twilight, dawn and dusk. And here it was, during the evening, and it has that look on its face that where do I go now? Because the idea is that these twigs which are there, in between the fields, have barbed wires on them, and it actually saw them. Thankfully, in the foreground it may not be so clear, but there are lots of barbed wires there. And many of them, while running, get entangled into those wires, and they can't really survive then if they are fatally injured, because running for them is second nature. And if you take that away, then they really can't survive. So here's another example of how a single photograph can communicate the need of sensitizing that we don't really need those barbed wires, do we? I mean, we have enough. We can actually show that the boundary is there, but barbed wires really it's a danger for them. And anyway, the habitat has been snatched. So this is something which you can talk about or think about. And here's another example of a jackal from Nandur, Madhemeshwar in Maharashtra. And we were looking for owls and nocturnal birds. And suddenly there was this rustling in the fields nearby, and we knew there was something big coming. So we quickly trained our eyes towards the road, which was leading to the fields. And there this creature was looking as fiercely as a tiger right into the camera. And it probably understood that we are there, so it looked and then quickly went towards the fields again. So here's another example, even though this is not really endangered, but this shows that even in our rural or urban landscapes, we have wildlife still living with us. So conservation is not really just about tiger reserves and national parks. It can be about the backdoor wildlife as well. So now that we have a lot of interface between wildlife and cities and wildlife and towns, we can really consider their role in our immediate vicinity too. Of course, this is one of the rarest species in India, the great Indian bustard from Jaisalmer Desert National Park. And this was a runner-up to being our national bird. But because of the name, as you can see, it could have possibly, that's the common story which goes that the name of the bird could have, been misspelled and misconstrued, and hence this was not chosen. That's one of the reasons why it wasn't chosen, at least. And today they are, numbered to be around only 80 to 100. Once they were about thousands across the grasslands of India, and now with shrinking habitats day by day, they're limited now. The largest population is now limited to Jaisalmer, in and around the Desert National Park. And here, it proudly walks. It's such a beautiful bird, and when you look at it, it's pretty large. In fact, it's not the size of an ostrich, but pretty much the same demeanor. And this was at the end of 4 days when we were searching for this bird in the desert, and we couldn't find it. And last day, our guide Radhesham Bishnoi, who is working very hard towards conservation, he called up and he said, we were in the same car, and he said, Godavan, and Godavan, he said. Godavan is the local name of the great Indian bustard. And the locals are very fiercely protective about this bird. And there it was, too much into the distance, but I could see it walking proudly amongst the landscape, owning the land. And this is what we need to realize, that a lot of the problems with the great Indian bustard is facing comes from the transmission lines, because a lot of linear, landscapes have been created in deserts, especially the power lines. And many of these birds, they can't see very well, in front. They can see laterally, but they can't see, frontally. And that is why they collide with these wires, and it leads to their fatal deaths. That is one of the reasons. Then the other is, of course, which we'll talk about, is the prevalence of feral dogs. And these dogs chase away these birds, eat up their eggs, etc. And this poor thing is just left because of an extended gestation period. And normally, which we'll see, large birds have only 1 or 2 eggs. So, and if that egg is destroyed, then it has to wait for another year. And in that year, if it itself dies, then there is no way to propagate the progeny. So that is what is happening to this beautiful bird. Here's another example which may not appear so related to conservation directly, But this is a group of brown-headed gulls in Mumbai. This many people might realize is, of course, the marine tribe. And there's on the left side, you might see a small hand trying to feed these birds out of the kindness of heart, of course. But this is also an issue because we don't realize that much of the food which you are actually giving to these birds is not really meant for them, because it's either too oily or sugary or spicy, and none of that is really good for them. It's not good for us. It's not good for them because their digestive systems are not meant to, consume these things. But that aside, there's another darker angle to this, and that is most of these birds which you will see in this photograph are juveniles, which means they are just learning how to hunt, how to go into the sea, dive, take out, fish, or even hunt otherwise, naturally. Now, what this feeding does is that they get dependent on humans for their feeding, which means that when they will be returning to their, breeding grounds, which is probably in Siberia or Russia or some other place, what is going to happen is they may not have the same level of skills which a naturally trained gull would have, and that could put their entire life into jeopardy. The entire population could just collapse simply because they would become too dependent on humans feeding them. And when they do not have those humans around, what happens then? So this is one example where we can limit our, altogether. In fact, there was an advisory issued by the local, I think the municipal corporation also for this at Mumbai, that they should not be fed. And I think that was a very good decision because this can bring imminent problems for such birds. Here's another example from Maharashtra, the beautiful lesser flamingos, which are residing in many wetlands. In fact, they become permanent residents in the Thani Creek, and that's a very good thing. And in fact, much of the creek is very surprisingly, there's a part of the creek which is quite rich in toxic as well, so toxins as well. But then it's a surprise that why they continue. One of the reasons is that due to eutrophication, a lot of these creeks or these wetlands have their algae which they feed on. So they are rich in terms of food, but then we don't realize in the long term what kind of impact would those toxins have. And again, here, for example, you have a lot of activity going in the background. Constructions are there, etc. So it's only a matter of time till when will these wetlands survive, and till when will these wetlands be able to sustain these populations of flamingos. So here's another example of conservation photography. And this beautiful bird is the Eurasian Wigeon, which is also a migratory bird, and probably one of those birds which has the largest beak to body ratio. And as you can see, it's a huge curved beak, which it probes into the soft mud near the beaches. But in the background, you'll see boats, you'll see human faces, you'll see plastic thrown around, etc. And the bird doesn't realize what it's eating. It doesn't know what plastic is. It doesn't know what toxins are, and it will probably consume that with its food too sometime. And God knows what kind of effect will that have. And just imagine the kind of journey which this bird would have undergone, thousands of kilometers from Russia or Siberia down to India, only to meet garbage. So this is the least we can do, that at least during the winter months, we can try keeping those beaches a little cleaner, so that at least these birds, because they have very, very limited areas where they feed. They are very shy. They don't necessarily go near human habitation, but here they don't have a choice. So, I mean, this is the least they could find. So they start feeding here, and accordingly, they can get disturbed. And the same example of the same bird here in a much better situation, where there was at least clean, place, so you can see them all lined up happily, basking in the sun, resting and talking to each other. So that the idea is that many of these birds are our guests, and we can treat them as such in one of those wintering months. Here was a very memorable moment in Jalana, Rajasthan. And again, towards the end of the evening, a lot of times it happens in wildlife photography is that at least I don't have much of expectation when I'm going towards an expedition or a tour. And right at the end of the tour, or in the later part of the expedition, you get to see something really special. And that's exactly what happened here. That we had the entire safari was done, and we were just about to return, and suddenly we saw this amazing male. I think the male is called Rambo, if I'm not mistaken, and he looked right into the camera for a split second. In fact, the face, the color, you might just realize that it's a little off. That's because there's a twig, there's a small stick in front of it which has been blurred by the camera, and that's why the face is not so orange as the rest of the body is. But that's how it is, and I think imperfections can sort of give rise to a very interesting photo sometime. So here's one example. This is the example which I wanted to connect with the Great Indian Bustards. And these are vultures, of course. There are many species, the Cinereus, the Himalayan, the Eurasian, etc. And they are happily feeding away. And this was one of those, I think, probably the first time I saw vultures up close. In fact, probably the first time I saw vultures altogether. And this is one question which a lot of us might ask ourselves, especially from the younger generation. You might not have ever seen a vulture. And if you ask your parents or your grandparents, they might say, yeah, we used to see them in our childhood, but now we don't see them. So that has been a sizable, there has been a visible shift in the population of vultures. And that's similar to sparrows. Sparrows also disappeared for some time and now they're back. So we really don't know the reason. Some of the scientific studies say that it is because of mobile, towers, but we really don't know. They're not very conclusive. But with vultures, the reason is very clear. And that was around 1990s. The vulture population in South Asia, including India and Thailand, Vietnam, etc., had millions of vultures, and they used to thrive in the outer parts of urban cities, as well as rural places where they had these dumping grounds or cattle, etc., the dying bodies of various animals. And they used to, feed their scavengers, as we know, that they feed on dead bodies and clean up that they sort of form the last chain of food cycle. So what happened was in 1990s, the population started dipping. Suddenly from millions, today they're reduced to thousands and maybe even hundreds of certain species. And the reason was pretty, it was a mystery. Initially, the scientists couldn't find out that what exactly was happening. And then partly because of serendipity and partly because of research, it was found out that the liver or certain organs of the vulture contained diclofenac, which is a bovine painkiller. It is given to cattle to relieve them of pain. And of course, we know that these vultures feed on dead cattle. So what happened was that this diclofenac drug proved to be highly fatal to them. There's something called biomagnification. What happens is that the drug which they take in instantly accumulates in their organs and causes their livers and kidneys to fail. So that is exactly what happened, and the entire population started getting wiped out. And this was realized much too late. And of course, the government did ban diclofenac as a painkiller, but by that time it was already too late, and the vultures had almost dipped to a almost nil population. But there is hope, and the good thing is that conservation highlights this importance of getting the vulture population back. But the question still remains: why are they so important? What is the need of vultures? Somebody might just ask, how do they really play a role? If they're not there, then well, we have other creatures who can finish off the dead bodies, etc. And the answer is right in front of our eyes. What happened when vultures were wiped out? Dogs started taking their place. And you might have noticed in a lot of rural as well as city areas, a lot of dog population has increased. Now, I love dogs, but the problem is that their population is a menace because one, vultures are very adept to clearing these dead bodies and do not let any flesh rot away. They finish it right down to the bone. And what is important in this respect is dogs are not thorough with that. They let the bodies fester and they become breeding grounds for many more pathogens. How do you think a swine flu, avian flu, maybe even COVID to some extent has come to this human interface? One of the major reasons is that we don't have effective scavengers, which used to finish off the dead bodies and waste away from our systems and prevented the flow of pathogens in our societies. This is a direct nexus of what wildlife does to us and what kind of services we can get from them. And this is one classic example of where we've gone wrong. But thankfully, vulture population is increasing now. We have breeding centers across the country. I think there are 3 or 4 at least. And recently they were released in the wild and they are making a comeback. So when we look at them, we shouldn't feel that they are ugly looking, weird looking creatures. They're actually doing the biggest service which we can possibly imagine. And next time you see a dog, you can just thank that person that this is entirely because of vultures you're here, because they had enough food to thrive on and their population increased. And because of this dog population, we are now connecting to the GIB, the Great Indian Bustard. This is exactly what has happened, that landscape never had dogs. They had just vultures which could finish off those cattle. But now the dogs started increasing and they have started becoming a menace. They've become feral, basically. and they started, chasing away local wildlife and killing them. So this is where the vicious circle is sort of coming to a close. Right. So that was part one, where we sort of set the stage for why do we need conservation photography, and that a lot of it was very serious. And some of you may not have expected it to be something so serious. You could have possibly expecting a lot of adventure, and that is the second part which we're coming to. That is the photo stories. And here we'll talk about some interesting stories from wildlife. And the first story is called The Family. These will be very short stories. They'll just take a minute or two, but they just communicate what wildlife means to us and what it can mean to all of you. So here is the great thickney, and this is a very strange looking bird. It's a wader, and it lives near shingles of riverbeds. And as you can see in the background, there are reeds. And this was while I was in a boat in Chambal in Madhya Pradesh, and they were hidden by this mound of grass. Now there were two of them, and the way they were looking at me sort of communicated that there's something special. There's something waiting in the grass, waiting to come out. So I kept waiting, and they kept looking, and gradually the boat turned a little bit, and this male came all together in the foreground, trying to see what kind of danger am I going to pose to them. And soon enough, the female followed with some little package of cotton ball there. There was a little tiny great thickney baby. And that was a beautiful moment of seeing the entire family in one frame, and just how amazing it is how they kept looking at me while I was there. And the baby, of course, was totally playing around, frolicking. It had no idea what we were going to do, and it had no idea what danger was. It just kept playing. But the parents kept looking at me directly. They were apprehensive that if I might just step out of the boat or come close to them, and they were looking at me. So this example just shows that the kind of emotions we have in our family, how protective we are about children, is exactly what is seen in wildlife too. So that's an example of photography. Here's another short story called The Unwanted Guest, and this was in Nagarhole, Karnataka. And we have these spotted deer. We were in a safari, so we were in a car, and they were happily feeding and busy eating, and once in a while looking at us and just making sure that we are not posing any threat to them. But suddenly they just decided to run away, and I don't know what it was or what they smelled, but they ran. And they can mean only one thing, right? When they run. And sure enough, this was my first tiger sighting, and I was so nervous, and so my hand was so unstable that you can see it's probably blurred. The photo is not very clear. And that is I think it was a tigress, if I'm not wrong. And there it was looking, intensely towards us. And it's probably saying that you made me miss my meal, because the deer somehow, we were between the tiger and deer, and they ran away. And you can see the beautiful orange and amazing saffron color, which defines the tiger. So this is another example of how wild creatures. Of course, a lot of us go into tiger reserves hoping and thinking that they would be able to see tigers, and a lot of us miss it. But that's what I always tell them, that never have an expectation of particularly seeing this animal or bird. Like, keep an open eye, keep your eyes and ears open, and sure enough, you'll see something even better. So that is something which always happens. The next story is called Mother, and here is a lesser whistling duck. This is right behind my home near the Ganga. It's called the Ganga Barrage in UP. And this was evening time, and these lesser whistling ducks are known to come out in the dusk when the sun is set. So the lighting was incredibly low. And what happened was, I saw this duck floating on the pond, but I saw a long tail behind it. And first I couldn't understand what it was. I thought it's probably some kind of cloth or a plastic which got stuck in its foot or something. But then I realized these individual units were moving too. And this is the first time I saw these 7 little fledglings following their mother in a straight file, disciplined, and which is very often seen. I'm sure a lot of us would have seen also that ducks, when they move in a straight file, very disciplined. So this is for the first time I saw that, and it was very heartwarming. And I didn't know what to do, because they were in a shallow pond, and I was very far, and I couldn't take pictures because the light was too low. So I tried going into the pond. I went into it knee deep, and I was standing knee deep in the pond, and trying to get their picture. But the story doesn't end there. So what happens is that these mother and children were floating around, and suddenly they came across these gray-headed swamp hen, and they are also water birds, and they feed largely on water hyacinth fruit. And so there they were. And you can see how the kids have turned around. They're scared of these intruders. They're saying, "Mom, help us. Who are these, strangers? We don't like them." And mother, I distinctly remember, for a good solid 1-2 minutes, kept, screaming at the top of her voice, whatever that voice is, to chase these two away. So this kind of emotional, outbursts are very interesting to see. And we realize how amazing it is when we would have seen something similar in our lives as well. And when you have somebody suspicious, you would chase them away and say that you find your own place, let us be. And if you see that there's a small dark, inlet in the background, that is where these, kids and mother used to stay. So that is all the more reason for the mother to become very protective and say that, this is our home, just let us be and let my children and I, have a good time here. So this is an example of another story of how wildlife really is not so wild after all. The next, of course, is a beautiful bird called the Indian skimmer. It's called Tough Love. And it was one of my, it was on my wish list to see two Indian skimmers in a mating ritual. And we'll see that we have a small video also, and I'll just try to show what it does. And the Indian skimmer is an amazing bird. It is one of those rare birds, probably the only bird species, which has the bill, which is, asymmetrical, which means that you have a short bill in, a short upper bill and a longer lower bill. And it's also called the scissor bill for the same reason. And the reason is that it skims across the surface. So most birds, as you know, that like, for example, kingfishers and, for example, cormorants, they dive into the water and they hunt for the fish, etc. But the skimmer is very unique. It just skims on the surface, and it thrives on the fish and other related creatures on the top of the surface, not very deep into the in the water. And that's how it feeds. It skims across the surface, tosses the bird up, and eats it. And these birds are very endangered. I was lucky to have been part of the Indian skimmer count, which was done this year and last year. And BNHS conducts these, amazing, counts across the Indian subcontinent, across countries, to actually count on the given date how many skimmers are there in those hotspots where they are normally found. And their numbers are not too good. They're just about 2,000 so, if I'm not wrong. And that is a very, very low number for this bird. And the reason is because most of the rivers have become so polluted that they really can't skim. There's no fish left on those, in those rivers, and they need extremely clear water. Chambal is one of those rare examples where the river has not been polluted because of a variety of reasons, partly because of religious reasons. It's considered to be, a bringer of bad luck, contrasting with Ganga. Or some of them, one of the reasons, of course, is geographical. It's right in the middle of ravines, which was a dacoit-infested area a long back. And, a lot of illegal activities used to happen there. So that is one of the reasons why industry hasn't picked up. And that could be one of the reasons why the Chambal remains, relatively untouched. And that's one of the reasons why these skimmers thrive there in good numbers. So coming to our photo, this was the dream shot, which I wanted and thankfully got it. Here, the male does a yogic posture of, trying to woo the female, and it goes, in front of her, trying to impress her. And if the female agrees, then they mate and they have kids and children. And that's how, these skimmers have their mating courtship initiated. And here's a small video which will show that same pair. I hope the video is visible. So as you can see, yes. And the bird is, the male is doing these weird dances, and it'll bend and do this, yogic posture, trying to, there you go. This is the classic mating posture for the male. And the female is not very interested right now. Probably is looking for some food, or probably some of the male she's interested in, who knows. So that is one example of skimmers doing their amazing rituals. And this was towards the sunset when a couple of them flew against the light. And you can see how amazingly lit their orange bills, which are so distinct, lit up, against the light. The next story is not so happy. It's called No Cause to Cheer. And the word cheer here is used for the cheer pheasant. It's actually not cheer pheasant, it's actually cheer, because the cheer word is derived from the Hindi word of pine, and they are normally found in those pine areas of Uttarakhand. And the cheer pheasant is a beautiful pheasant. You can see the long trail of, feathers behind it. And, I had almost given up hope. And as usual, when we were just about to leave, there it was, a whole family of them. they were walking up towards the slope and crossing the road and going to the other side. And here's another photo showing them. There are about 1 to 5 of them here. In fact, there are about a dozen in all, because the camera which I have is it's pretty, has a high focal length, so it sort of zooms in. So I couldn't get a really a landscape shot of all of them together in one shot. But here's 5 of them, and as you can see, they're gradually going up the slope. This is a slope, and they're going up it, and then they cross the road and went up further. But one little pheasant got lost, and it was about to cross the road when this car came honking at full speed, and the poor thing had to run back again. So the idea is that, and it kept staying there. We kept waiting for it to come, but it probably didn't, it was too scared to come up again, or as you can see, the tail is very short. So it was probably a juvenile. And, it was waiting back down in the depths, and the parents and the family kept calling, that where are you? So these kind of things, when you look in the wild, there are no words left. You really realize that how are they so different from us, really? They're practically the same. What would happen if your own family member gets lost in a frenzy of danger? What would you do? You would panic. So they were panicking, and they were calling for this little juvenile to come and join them. Thankfully, though, in about half an hour, this little I think it is a male got enough courage to go back and join them. But the problem is, again, what the idea behind this photo is that what kind of dangers and what kind of unnecessary stress we are posing to these incredible creatures, which are also threatened. So here's one example of conservation photography. And here, of course, is my favorite bird. I have claimed this in various forums and fora, and I realize that the lesser Florican is a bird which is just incredible, and I can't sort of get over this really incredibly looking, incredibly behaving bird. And this is from Rajasthan, Shokalia. This is also a desert grassland, a grassland bird, and is also belongs to the Bustard family, the Great Indian Bustard family, and this is also endangered. So the problem with bustards is that they're large birds. They are mostly, dwelling on the ground, and they are mostly grassland, dependent. Most of the grasslands in India are undergoing sea change, either because of agriculture or because of commercial or construction activities. So most of the grasslands are getting lost out, and they don't have the same level of protection as forests do. So this is from the grassland, and so what has happened is, as we saw in the black buck example, that a lot of agricultural fields have become their home now, because they are okay with the transition from grassland to agricultural fields. And here this bird is also there in the background of tur and moong dal. That is the kind of cultivation which is there in Rajasthan. And this bird is also having a very interesting ritual for mating, and this is during the monsoon. So I won't describe much of the mating ritual, because the video will do more justice. So you'll see this bird jumping up and doing a triple flutter and falling down. And here is the video. So keep your eyes open; it'll come any second. One, and there you go. So if you could see, that's great. Otherwise, I'll replay it just to get that idea of what this bird does. And there you go. So it does that little cute jump, and this is how it looks while it's jumping. You can see it has this interesting crest on its head while jumping, and a very interesting cryptic kind of coloration on its feathers to merge with the background and stay hidden. And very interestingly, these birds are only visible in the monsoon when they do this jumping up and down 20 to 100 times a day, and they don't tire, and they try to attract the females, which are also hidden in those grasses, because they want tall grasses where they can hide. And after the monsoon ends, it wasn't very clear where these birds used to go, because they were locally migrant, which means that they used to stay in India but somewhere else. And some research, I think, has been done. It has been established that they go towards the Deccan, and they stay there towards the non-monsoon months, and again come back during the monsoons. So this is a lesser Florican, a very interesting bird, my favorite. This is a story from the night, and this is from Thattikad, Kerala. And here we were walking in the forest. It was absolute pitch dark, and there are these very interesting creatures called nightjars. They are not exactly owls, but they are sort of related like that. They are nocturnal. They are also pretty much hunters of the night. And this, you can see the kind of crazy colors this bird has, which keeps it very well camouflaged in the forest. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go to this forest was to see the slender loris. And the slender loris is a very interesting mammal. It's very tiny, very delicate, and it stays on these trees, and has this interesting defense mechanism that once it gets scared, it raises its hands above its head and freezes, just like humans do. And thankfully, I happened to see this. So while we were returning from the trail, what happened was it was almost sure that we're not going to see it because there was no movement at all in the trees. We were trying to watch it through flashlights, but we really couldn't see it. But then again, as I said, that towards the end things happen. So towards the end of the journey, there was some movement, and this little tiny shy creature came into the light. And you can see it's very, very delicate, and its movements are very slow. Even while running, it'll go very slowly and try to climb across the next branch and hide itself. So this is how it looks like. And you can see the hands are very, very thin, very delicate. But it's acutely, it has acute sense of smell and even sight in the night because it's a nocturnal creature. And this is an example of an endemic species, which is found only in India. So that is one interesting example from Kerala. And this is a strange battle. It's the battle of two birds called the glossy ibis from Bhigwan, Maharashtra. And this was also from a boat. I was in a boat, and I knew that there was some kind of action between these two gentlemen, I'm assuming. And so what happened was that I was, trying to focus my camera to these birds, and gradually these birds started, fighting and noisily, attacking each other. So they were probably defending their territory. And this war became, more and more intense. They were, clacking their beaks against each other, and then they flew against each other. And you can see the golden droplets flying all around. It was a beautiful sunset. So the droplets are all lit up because of the golden light. And of course, they took up right in the midair as if they were, floating midair, and they were fighting with each other. And the fight continued for about 2-3 more minutes. And towards the end, it almost looked as if the gentleman on the right was defeated, but it's just a mid shot. It didn't really fall back like that. It's just the kind of shot which the photo sort of freezes midair. So this is also an interesting example how fights break out and how they can be interesting, photographic, subjects too sometimes. Here's an example from Nagaland. These amazing birds are called the amur falcons. And we as a country are very lucky that we have about 1 lakh to 2 lakh of these birds coming every year as passage migrants. So there are something called winter migrants, which are basically going to stay here for all throughout the winter months, almost through the entire winter period. And there are something called the passage migrants. So the passage migrants, by definition, mean that they are only there for the passage. So they stay here for a very short time, maybe 15 to 20 days, and then they leave. So the story behind this is that I was in Mumbai at the time, and for a weekend, I had to travel to Nagaland, and it took 16 hours from Mumbai to reach to this point, and 16 hours back, where I could just stay for 4 hours in Nagaland just to see these birds. So the idea is that these birds attracted me so much because this is how the route looks like, because they start from the Amur, as many of the geography students would know. Amur is a river in Russia, and that's where they start off during the winters. They stop over at Nagaland, which is our state in the northeast. They stay there for 15-20 days. They come towards the south. They might stop over in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Goa, that area as well. And then they finally reach the southern part of Africa, where they spend their winters. And then on the way back, they take a different route towards the Eurasian part, maybe Middle East as well, and then go back to their breeding grounds in Russia and China and Mongolia. Right. So this is that photograph of those amur falcons flying midair. It was a sky full of them. They were like a swarm of amur falcons flying all across. And this is the spectacle which I wanted to see. And here's a video which will highlight their movement. It was spellbinding. You needed to be there to see those huge number of falcons, and they're very pretty little falcons, moving across the entire, sky. The sky was full of falcons, and hence the story's name is called Sky of Falcons. And these falcons actually, I recently came to know that they're not really related to raptors. They're more related to parrots and parakeets. So that explains why they are so pretty. And here's an example of the amur falcon, the male and the female. The male is the one which is flying away with its wing outspread, and the female is on the left side, shying as if. And this, I was lucky to capture that moment of the amur falcons in Nagaland. These birds are also amazing, but there's a very interesting story behind these birds. And that is that in Nagaland, a lot of these birds used to be hunted down by the hundreds, and their meat used to be sold, especially during their passive migrant period for those 15-20 days. When the sky used to be full, the local people used to hunt them down and sell their meat at, I think, 25 rupees per bird. And that's how they earned, which was their local subsistence and sustainability for their own economic livelihoods. And what happened gradually is that when these birds came to the limelight and people started knowing that, okay, they are endangered, they come here for only a small amount of time, and then they have to go towards a much larger journey towards Africa. And a lot of photographers, a lot of conservationists started going there and talking to these local people and explain to them that do not hunt them. Instead, why don't you do something like ecotourism? You get those tourists and get those photographers and get other scientists to this place where you can see them, and charge them a fee instead of killing them. And in that way, they got directly linked with their survivability. So the falcon survivability meant their livelihood was intact. This kind of model, if it is employed in various places of India, will actually help both ecology and economy. And that is one of the reasons why understanding the base of conservation becomes so important. And thankfully, because of the last 10-15 years, there have been no significant killings of the falcons, and their populations are thriving. Every year, they are happily coming to Nagaland, Doyan, the place, stay there for a couple of days, eat. And by the way, they were feeding in the sky. They're aerial feeders, so they were feeding on these insects, etc., in the sky. And then on the way back, they can happily go to Africa. And here's an example, probably the last story for the day is called Conspiracy. And this is from Nandur Madhameshwar again. And here you can see there are two golden jackals. They're sort of communicating with each other. And it's a beautiful wetland. Nandur Madhameshwar is a sight to behold. I think it has been recently declared a Ramsar wetland as well. So here, these two jackals were planning to attack a bird, a huge bird called the purple heron, which you'll see in the next slide. And it's amazing how there are three of these jackals, they were trying to coordinate with each other, like triangulation, how to narrow down and finally attack that single bird. So there are two of them here, and the third jackal is in the background. You can't see that in this photograph. And here, one of the jackals started moving towards the bird. And as you can see, on the right side, the bird has its neck really high up, and it does that when it has to look around and see that, is it safe or not. And interestingly, the bird maintained its posture. It was like, okay, take your time. I'm here. I can fly anytime. And that's exactly what happened. The golden jackal kept walking, and it kept, staying still. But it didn't realize that there was a jackal coming from back, from behind its back as well. And suddenly that, jackal made an appearance, and the bird decided to fly and took off right in the, nick of time. So this high octane moment was captured, and it was really interesting to see. The jackals can actually hunt these birds. They're huge, as you can see, and they can actually hunt them as well. But then thankfully, birds are gifted with these feathers, and they can just instantly fly. But it was very interesting to know that it kept waiting, sort of saving its energy and making sure that the jackals are coming really near it, and only then did it take that decision to fly, because they spend a lot of energy flying. So that sort of brings us to the end of our photo stories. And now we'll just talk a little bit of photography ethics and what we need to be, taking care of while we're going into the field, into trails, into national parks and sanctuaries, and what we need to, do and don't do. So the first is dress appropriately, and this might seem as a very strange requirement, but it really is, important. And when we realize that, we see, I remember, for instance, that about 15 years back, when I used to, not be so keen, a photographer as such, but I was keen into animals, but I was not really a photographer then. But I remember seeing a lot of, people in camouflage, and I used to wonder, why are they wearing that dress, and is it really required? Is it just a code, or what is it? And then gradually, by and by, I realized that is what is really important, because it is the threat perception, especially for birds. They are very sensitive to colors. So if you're wearing something like red or pink or green, or something which is fluorescent, so it sort of stands against the background, and it sort of serves as a warning sign that this might be a predator, or this might be some person who is not really good for me. So they might just be a little aware of you, and they may not be going about doing their activities in a normal way. So it's an undue stress for them. So it's better to wear dull clothes like beige or camel or camouflage, and that really helps being in the environment and blending with it. The second is preserving the habitat, which is when we go there, in those fields and etc. We shouldn't try to change, or try to cut down a tree or a twig in order to make a hole for viewing, because you never know that what you just cut off could have been the favorite perch of a bird where it used to hunt, or it could be a potential place for a nest, or it could be something else. It could be a hiding spot for a deer. So we don't really know what kind of habitat are we destroying. So it's better not to change that. It's always better let it be natural, and it's always interesting to capture these creatures in their natural habitat. Most of my best shots are actually are those which are hidden with they are a little camouflage, little twig coming on their face or behind or in the front, and that sort of brings a natural environment to that photo, and that saves the integrity of the environment. The third is breeding and nesting, and this is important, especially because at this time, the parents of the offspring or the birds or animals are very vulnerable, and they have their entire energies and concentration spent on their children and their well-being and their survival. So in this time, if we go ahead and make an added pressure on them, it is going to prove fatal, because you might know that a lot of birds, for instance, once they realize that their nest is compromised, or they feel that there is a particular kind of threat to their nest, or the eggs are no longer safe, then they'll altogether leave that nest. Now, this might seem cruel. This might even say that how can they do that, and how can they possibly leave them? But the idea is that birds realize that they will not be able to bring up their baby in a safe environment, and the baby will not be able to survive anyway. So instead of that is their instinct. So they really can't do much about it, and that's how they think. And so they abandon that nest and seek some other place where they are more sure that, okay, this is where the chance of my babies are going to be better. So this is why it's very important that when they are breeding or nesting, we make sure that we do not unnecessarily go about disturbing them and going too close to the nest. And in fact, it's always best to avoid nest photography, unless, of course, you are associated with a scientific program or it's part of research or something like that. Using a silent shutter also helps to minimize your noise, and many of the cameras now have that option. So that can be one thing. And we should be able to limit our playback. Now, the playback is essentially an interesting feature which we use in bird photography, especially. We have these sounds of those birds, and in order to get those birds out from the bushes or from the trees, we play that sound. So the bird listens and it feels, oh, that's my neighbor, or that's my kid, or that's a potential mate, and it steps out and you get your photo. That's the idea behind playback. But the problem with playback is a lot of times it can have some negative impact, and one of them is leading to pair breakups, and you might unconsciously become a match breaker. What happens is that many of these birds are in a courtship period, and if you land up playing a sound which is particularly attracted to either of the sex, they might just leave their partner and search for the this interesting sound which is coming, and they might ultimately not mate. And of course, the playback is just sound; it's not a physical entity, and this might lead to a problem in their population, especially because if these birds are endangered or rare, then it's all the more reason not to play their sounds, especially during their mating period. The other point which we can think about is you can use playback when you hear a sound and not throughout the trail. So for example, when you hear a sound and you know that the bird is around, then you can possibly play the playback and maybe get the bird a little closer. So that way you're not wasting its energy. At the same time, you're not, you have your chance to take a photo as well. So that is one example of being a little mindful of playback. And once you have discovered these places where you have a rare bird or a rare creature which you saw and it's frequenting that place, it's always better to keep that place hidden. Yes, contrary to what people might say that you share and you should let people know. Well, it's okay if it's a bird or an animal which is, not really endangered, but we're talking about those which are. And hence, it's always better to not disclose their exact location. You might just probably say that it was in a particular sanctuary or in a national park or etc. But do not exactly specify that, okay, this was near that tree or near the pond, etc., where the bird is coming, because it will unnecessarily attract a lot of people, and they may not be as discreet or as mindful as you are, and it might lead to their damage in their habitat. The next is maintaining a distance, which we sort of covered, that while we are approaching these animals or birds, we should make sure that we're not encroaching their physical space. We wouldn't like the same done to us. So the same, we should understand that the distance should be maintained. And in fact, you will see that if you're sitting down, if you're calm, if you're not doing too many distractive activities, you will see that they continue doing their activities, and they'll start trusting you as somebody who is not a threat to them. They might even come near you themselves. In fact, a lot of times I've seen that once I sit down and with my camera and just wait, a lot of times birds actually come nearby and start feeding around very close to you. So that happens, and that's something which is very, very common. It happens all the time. So you don't really need to venture and try to go closer. They'll come closer to you. Give them that chance. Of course, the next is follow the law, which is that many of these protected areas have certain regulations, have certain rules. So it's always best to follow them. For example, not littering, not making sound, not feeding, etc. So those are always good to follow because they are there for you as well as for the animals. It's always nice to follow them. Captioning responsibly is a do which many of us don't realize, but it has a vast impact, particularly in this age of social media when you are uploading your photographs and sharing it to the world. You need to make a point that what particular aspects of that creature appeal to you, and whether you followed any of these ethics or not. If you mention that, it's going to generate a positive effect. It's going to communicate to people that, okay, we can have excellent photographs while following ethics. And that's very important, because a lot of times we feel that the best photos are those which can only be clicked when you are violating some kind of ethic. You go unnecessarily close, or you try to feed them or something like that. But the idea is that if you caption responsibly, if you tell them that these are endangered species and they are under a lot of threat, and therefore we have to be sure of what we are doing, that sort of spreads the message that ethics are very important while doing photography. So that's something which we should do. And when in doubt, always think like wildlife, rather think like yourself. So if you're thinking that you have somebody who just comes into your home and starts, rummaging around your house, how would you feel? So that's what how wildlife would feel. It would feel that its privacy is being violated, or it might feel that it's in danger, and it might stress it out. So the idea is that when you are in doubt, just think like wildlife. Do not unnecessarily try to cause stress to that animal. The next, of course, is don't distress wildlife, which is now the don'ts. So not distressing them is pretty much what we discussed here, that we don't unnecessarily go close to them, don't chase them, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Not crowding is something which we may not realize, but normally when we are traveling in safaris and cars, animals don't perceive us as threats because they're sort of used to that movement of the car. They know that the car has people and the people won't get out, and they treat you as one unit. They don't look at you as separate targets which might attack me. So cars is one thing, but when you're traveling on a trail or walking down a particular path which is in the wild, then it's better not to travel as a crowd. You either maintain a straight line, or you travel discreetly. You maybe two of you in the front, then a little distance, then some others, like that. That what that ensures is that the animal or the bird doesn't see you as multiple threats, and it doesn't get stressed out, and it stays when you're there. So it serves in your interest as well, that the animal or the bird doesn't look at you as a threat, and then therefore it might just come forth and continue doing its activities. And not chasing them is also part of not distressing them, because the further you chase them away, especially in bird photography, it's observed a lot of times that people tend to go behind and bird keeps getting chased. So maybe you can do that for a couple of times and then leave it, because the bird is giving you a clear message that, okay, I am not liking your presence. So respect that and just let it go. So because a lot of times these birds have, their energy budget is very limited, and they can't really spend a lot of energy on just running away from you, which is not a meaningful threat to them. And when the actual predator or an actual threat comes, they may not have the resources to save themselves. So it's better to just let them be and go for it. Not littering, as we discussed, is important because part of the litter could land up causing infections to them, or it could be food material which doesn't suit them. It could cause a death, etc. And hence it could be a problem for the entire population. And we shouldn't manhandle them either. A lot of times we have the temptation of picking up an amphibian or a reptile, and especially for macro photography, you might just physically handle it by hand, and that's not advisable, because you're putting the animal itself in a lot of stress. And B, there's a chance of infection on both sides. You might infect the creature and the creature might infect you. It might even bite you because it's not sure of where it has been taken away. And the infection which you might cause to the creature could spread to the local population, and the entire population might be wiped out. So that is one problem which can be there just because of your single exposure of germs. On the other side, if you are doing a scientific research, or you feel that if a bird has maybe fallen down from a nest or something, it's always better to put on a glove. You can carry some gloves and pick them up and put them back into their place, which is actually fine. And a lot of times the samples are collected this way also. So that is fine, but not handling them with your bare hands, and not provoking them just in order to, or not giving them bait in order to get a reaction. So a lot of times when a tiger comes or a lion comes and it's lying down on the road and you decide that it's not doing anything, it's just sleeping. So you start throwing stones, or you start throwing, you start making noises or trying to provoke the animal so that it gives you a reaction. And that eliciting a reaction is important for you because you need that in a photo. But think from the point of the view of the animal, it doesn't really get a lot of rest. It has to be careful, about a lot of factors around it. If it's a female tigress, for example, she might have to take care of her children who might be attacked by larger predators. Or if it's a bird, it might, have to take care of its nest or feeding. So if it's resting, just let it rest. And sure enough, in some time, it'll probably get a yawn, do some activity. And then, you give that time to them and they'll actually give you excellent photos. And not feeding them, as we discussed in the brown-headed gull photo, that feeding them is a strict no-no, and that shouldn't be done at any point. Not speeding your vehicles is important because, again, it has a risk of running down on a creature. And it's always better, especially when you are on a wild, rich path where you know that there's a lot of wildlife. It's better to be a little mindful of your car speeding through the path. And no noise, which means that we shouldn't really talk loudly or play music or honk in a place which is this hallowed space of wildlife, where you are there for a very short time. So it's all the more reason to stay silent. And staying silent will also help you hear a lot of sounds. And those sounds can actually guide you to look at birds or animals which you wouldn't have thought otherwise to see. And last, of course, is no flashes. It's always better to not use those sudden flashes or extremely bright torchlights, especially for nocturnal animals. Like the one which I showed you, the photo was taken from a very dim flashlight. And the interesting part is that you don't aim the flashlight directly at the creature. You aim at a slightly angle to them so that it doesn't fall directly on their eyes, because they can get temporarily blinded. And they might not feed at that time. They may not be able to find their home. They may not be able to find, they may not be able to run away from predators. So that's very important that we don't unnecessarily cause confusion by, bringing on bright lights to them. So as you can see that photography is not really all, just shutter, exposure, aperture, and ISO. It has a lot to do with these things also. And that was the reason why I wanted to make this part of the presentation, because it's extremely important that we get a little bit more sensitive when we're going towards wildlife photography, because that has those challenges, and we are getting in touch with highly endangered creatures, and they deserve our protection. And next, of course, we'll quickly look at courses. I'm not going to really speak a lot about in details of these. There are some available from BNHS. So what you can probably do is you can take a screenshot of this and explore later. There are some from WWF. There's from the TGC, which is on photography. And there is exploring conservation courses from National Geographic, which is extremely important and gives you a very good hands-on training on how conservation is done at the ground level. There's the Foundation for Environment Education, which does this journalistic photography course. The Wildlife Institute of India, of course, has masters and various short-term courses also. And the Cornell Lab has interesting courses on ornithology and bird photography. So I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but I felt that this doesn't really require a lot of explanation. And you can possibly take a screenshot now and maybe explore. And I implore to all participants that whoever have a little bit of understanding and want to explore more, it's very important that you read a little bit more. Only when we read and understand wildlife will we be able to appreciate what they are actually all about. So that brings us to the interactive session, and this beautiful bird is the orange-billed blue magpie from Uttarakhand. And you can reach WII at their handles on Twitter and Instagram, and same with me. And I think Dr. Krishnamurthy is also here, so we can take up some questions. And thank you so much. And I'll probably come to the acknowledgements later because there are a lot of people I need to thank. So we'll quickly take the acknowledgement, the interactive session now.
I would say thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Gupta, I think it was a very mesmerizing webinar. I would say you kept us captivating. Let me be very honest. Usually when we have the webinar, sometimes we just initiate it and then maybe just switch off and start working. Usually happens. But in your case, it was not possible. I'll tell you honestly, because it was all with pictures and everything. So I think you really took us through everything. And hats off to you. It was an excellent one.
Thank you.
And I'm not only that, I think it looked like you're faculty from Wildlife Institute or from other institutions where you have been working with the wildlife all along. Because I could see the connection, the explanation to each of those, even particularly the way you explained about the skimmer display. I mean, this is typically what happens. And the amur falcon, I think these are, some of these excellent stories. And Bustard, I think you have touched upon all major things. One interesting thing, I think the viewers probably will be appreciate is that I think your presentation excluded some of the very common one which generally people like to show, the elephant or the big ones. But I think, of course, those are things.
In fact, that is a conscious choice. A lot of times,
I could see that. I could see that because that is the reason that we could then understand the wildlife from a much wider perspective. Otherwise, it just takes away the moment to only few species. So thank you so much again on behalf of this. But a few questions I have, maybe if Amir has something, can I go with a few questions, Amir? Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I was just wanting to ask you, based on, the way I see, you seem to have spent a lot of time in different places. So that I have two questions. One is about how do you actually balance your work with this photography? And my second question is, have you had any very dangerous encounters during photography?
Okay, right. Very interesting questions, Dr. Krishnamurthy. So, well, of course, regarding balance, it's something. It's very, of course, it's important. I realize that whenever we have some passion, I think we automatically find time because they're the same 24 hours for everybody. So we have to make sure that we are able to give it some time. So when the field, when we talk about field, like that, for example, when I was in Mumbai, there was a little bird called the little crake, and that is a winter visitor, and that was found that came to Pune. And it was just there for a couple of days. So I knew that I had to quickly go there, otherwise it will go away. So what I used to do is I used to get up early in the morning, 4 o'clock, travel to Pune, click photos, and come back and join office by 11. So that is the kind of thing which we can do. Or weekends we can use that. A lot of people can and have weekends free. And thankfully when the weekends are free, you can just travel on Friday night to go to a distant location. Like for example, Thatikart was exactly that, or Doyang in Nagaland was exactly that. I went on Friday, stayed there for 2 nights, and came back and joined on Monday. So that kind of thing we can do, and whenever you get time. And of course, sometimes I take long leaves when I'm going for Arunachal. I take a 15-day leave every year, and then go for a proper expedition where you can go to and explore the wildlife in those areas. So that is one example. And as far as danger, well, it actually happened quite recently. In Jim Corbett. So what happened was there was this tigress, and she had four cubs, and they were large cubs. They were like almost sub-adults. And what happened was that the tigress had crossed, and 3 of its kids had also crossed the road. And by that time, our car was just behind. The Jeep was behind it, and so the problem is that the area where they were crossing had a very small path, which was it had soft mud. The other path, the other area had a lot of twigs and a lot of pointy thorns, etc. So the cub was very, the cub's, the paw was very soft. So it needed to go through that mud, and it was not wanting to go through the thorny path. So the cub was not able to go because the car was just parked near that. And the tigress really came outside for a second and made this huge roar and said, "Get out of the way, let my kid come." Okay, so that exactly happened.
Great. Thank you so much. Amir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, sir. So we'll just switch on to YouTube and let's see if we have any comments, suggestions, and some questions as well.
Yeah.
So let me just check it out. We got a very interesting appreciation from our national coordinator.
Oh.
From the ENVIS secretary. He's saying that it is very interesting to.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Kumar Rajneesh sir said it's very.
Thank you.
And then we have Vikas Kamal. He's from Kanpur also. He's saying that it is unbelievable to see the Kanpur also has a good biodiversity outside.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the ideas. One of the reasons why I wanted to show that, Kanpur, in fact, all urban landscapes have a little bit of wildlife and biodiversity. All we need to do is find that place and just be there.
And then he again said that you shared some beautiful stories. Thanks for that. Vikas Kamal is his name.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Then we have a message from Rahul Bhatia. He's also connected to our ENVIS secretariat. He's currently heading our green skill development programs over there.
Okay. Wow.
He's saying that beautifully woven stories of India's wonderful wildlife.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And then we have some comments from other people. Sita Srivastav is saying interesting stories.
Right. Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. She's my senior from the service, so I know her.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much.
Drax Jain is another person. He's saying great stories, Raghav. And then we have a message. We have a comment from Anand. He's saying that many thanks for your enlightening presentation. With all due respect to your background, cannot help wondering if your services would have been better appreciated in the Indian Forest Service.
Right. Well, I guess that's part of the reason. But I guess passion and hobby and passion work may sometimes thrive independently. So in my case, that has happened luckily. And I guess I'm happy that I'm able to give my services in the revenue service and yet be able to do something as a citizen for wildlife. So thank you.
Then we have another comment from Dr. K. Pakus Handy. He's saying that thank you very much, sir. It was a very valuable lecture that you delivered. And we have another message from Anand again. Using your current work background, I dearly hope you are going after the highly lucrative poacher trade and clamping down on their illicit revenue.
Absolutely.
And help shut down illegal operations.
Very, very. Thank you so much, Anand. Yes, that is one of the things which I have on my agenda. The WCCB, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, does that. So I hope maybe in the future I'll be able to work with it.
We'll take this final comment from Sanket. He's saying very interesting session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanket.
So we had these comments and suggestions, and we have also shared the feedback link with the participants wherein they can share their feedback, and then we'll get back to you, sir.
Right.
And so that is it from the YouTube session comment section, and then it is over to I would like to thank you, sir. So that's it from the YouTube section. So we had these few comments and suggestions, which we have just finished that session. So it was actually really great to have you back, sir. So because I have been in touch with you in person and I have met you. And so it is really great to know you. So this brings us to the end of this webinar. So on behalf of ENVIS resource partner at WII-ENVIS Institute of India, Dehradun, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Raghav Gupta, for enlightening us with your diverse knowledge in the field of wildlife conservation photography and the fascinating stories you shared with us. I'm pretty sure the precious knowledge that you have shared with us today will definitely help the researchers, the conservationists, students, as well as the people who have a passion for the wildlife conservation and photography as well. And in a way, they can make an impact in the field of conservation. And there was a great message which you shared, which is that you can help reduce wildlife conflicts with people is by not feeding the wildlife. So feeding wildlife can lead to a number of serious problems. So human food is not healthy for wildlife animals, and they don't need food from us to survive.
Right. Absolutely.
They have specialized diets, and they can become malnourished or even die if we fed them wrong foods.
Exactly.
And wildlife photography session, ethics session was actually much needed session. And the courses you shared were it is highly appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
And this is something for you. So I've just got it jotted down from somewhere. Right. So wildlife photographers are nature wizards, and they do not have a wand to cast a spell, but a magical eye to enter the magical world. And that eye is the viewfinder. And you truly are a wizard, sir. And it was really amazing to see your work, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And in the end, I would like to thank MOFCC and Mr. Secretary, Director of Wildlife Institute of India, and our NVIS coordinators for their support. And I'm also thankful to our NVIS team and our IT cell team who are all involved in this, and I'm highly thankful to them. And at the end, I'm also thankful we are highly thankful to all the people who have joined us online on YouTube and on our website. So that's it from my side. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
To say, sir, please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Amir. Thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you for all the participants also. So here's a thanks from me also. I'd like to thank the Wildlife Institute of India, ENVIS. I'd like to thank Dr. Ramesh Krishnamurthy, sir. Thank you so much for having me here. Dr. Ramesh Chinnasamy, JP Nautiyal, of course, Amir, for always being in touch and helping me come and make this dream a reality. Thank you, and of course to all the participants who were there who spent some time and hopefully gained something out of it and became a little bit more inspired towards wildlife. And of course, in the end, I'd like to thank my department, the Income Tax Department, who's given me so much in terms of professional life, of course, but it has given me this chance to explore this aspect of my life. So thank you for everything, and thank you so much. And I hope to collaborate with the Institute again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the best. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, sir. I will see you again.
Okay, sure. Absolutely. See you.
Bye-bye. Okay, sir.
Bye.
Left.
Sir. So should we end the session then?
Yeah, please end it. We can reconnect later. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was great, It was nicely done. I think my compliments to you. I think I'm totally confident that now you guys can do a lot of great work.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
I think this national coordinator, it's nice to see that national coordinator could also be there. And so I think we express our gratitude to him and others. I think we'll try to see more such things, and maybe this is a sort of thing that we need to, kind of bring on the platform to educate people. It's like we discussed that we can also take it to the college students next time on this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Take care, sir.